The First Church of Cannabis actually exists, and its leaders are suing the state of Indiana for their right to exercise their religious freedom. We're joined by WGY legal analyst Chaz Farcher of Martin Harding and Mazzotti. Good morning, Chaz.
Good morning, Kelly.
Okay, so where do we draw the line here? This is a group that claims that they have a legitimate religion. They're called the First Church of Cannabis, and their sacrament, so to speak, similar to communion, would be marijuana.
Seems like anything goes nowadays, doesn't
I know.
Pretty much, does it?
Well, it has to do with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is actually a federal bill that was passed in the early 90s under the Clinton administration. The Supreme Court grappled with the same issue in the early 2000s when you had several Native Americans who wanted to use peyote, a hallucinogenic drug, during their religious ceremonies. And, those Native Americans actually won the case, and they've been allowed to use peyote during their religious ceremonies. So there is precedent for it. What the First Church of Cannabis doesn't have that the Native Americans do have is the history behind their newfound religion. So, you're going to have to actually establish that they're a legitimate religion, and these are legitimate religious beliefs, which I think may be an uphill battle for them.
Well, and then where do you draw the line if they say, okay, well, we'll grant you this freedom? Then what if someone decides to say, well, I'm going to worship the Church of Heroin or other kinds of really dangerous behavior?
Right, that's exactly the question that will be in front of the court. So the government's got to show that they've got a compelling interest to prevent someone from practicing what they claim to be a religious belief. So the compelling interest here clearly is preventing the use, the free-range use of drugs that have been deemed illegal or dangerous. On the other hand, the church or whoever's trying to push this, they've got to prove or show that they've really got an actual religious belief, and that this is an actual part of their religion. So it really is a factual question when it comes down to what the Church of Cannabis is. How long has the church been around? How many people do they have in the church? How long has this been a part of their established quote-unquote religion? And I think those factual questions are where this church may run into some tough spots.
Now, does the legalization of marijuana, medical marijuana, does that complicate it at all?
I don't think so. The medical marijuana bills that are out there, for instance, in New York, have specific exemptions and specific people that can use it under what circumstances, and in most cases you still can't use it publicly. So I think if the legalization of marijuana on a whole scale, I think would take the issue off the table, but the legalization of medical marijuana, I still don't think apply to the situation. They want to be able to use it, as a group in a church setting, to some extent in the public sphere. They've got to find another exemption. I think that's where this Religious Freedom Restoration Act kind of becomes their avenue to do that, if at all.
Now, you had mentioned all that, background and history and those other factors that were relevant to a, decision on whether it was a legitimate religion. Where does the actual law come into play? Let's just take a far-flung, upsetting example. Let's say they say my religion is marrying underage children, something despicable that's clearly illegal. Where does the actual letter of the law trump a religious point of view?
Yeah, and again, it comes down to, the government can regulate. The freedom of religion is not absolute, just like any other freedom. So the government's got to have some kind of compelling interest, something that they're really trying to regulate, something that would be harmful to the public. And on what scale would it be harmful to the public? And what's the history behind whatever you're trying to do? So in a case like that, where you're trying to marry 10 or 12-year-olds, that seems like it's something that the government would have a compelling interest in, and proving that you had a religious belief that supports that, might be a struggle. So it really is a balancing test, and it really is an individual case-by-case factual analysis. So, in the case of the Native Americans, you've got a group that have been practicing their religion and their rituals for hundreds of years. It's 100 people that do it, as opposed to, thousands of people smoking marijuana on a mass scale. But how dangerous is marijuana compared to other drugs? So it really is a factual case-by-case analysis.
WGY legal analyst Chaz Farcher of Martin Harding Mazzotti, 1-800-LAW-1010. Chaz, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Chuck.